I'm Cassia Harvey. I am a cellist and a cello teacher, and I've written some cello books. I started playing cello when I was 8, and about, I want to say 6 months later, I wrote in one of my only journal entries of my entire childhood that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life, and I did. I love it. I love teaching. I started teaching when I was 16. We lived in a really poor neighborhood and there weren't any cello teachers around there, and people couldn't afford cello teachers even if they had them around. So I started teaching as an apprentice with my mother. My mother's a violin teacher, and we would teach a group class together of, I think it was like 3 students in our row home living room, and I learned how to teach from her. So at 16, I was teaching adults, I was teaching children, and I taught all through high school. I have a life of teaching. I do performing with my sister, who's a violinist. We're working on our 2nd album right now. We're about to release it. And I've released an album of cello and piano music, the Russian cello. And we perform all around, and also in a piano trio with a pianist. It's called the Musicalia Ensemble. I started writing technique when I was, I want to say 18. I was at a camp festival for musicians, and I had a teacher who was not really helping me at all. And I was there, he was teaching there and giving me lessons that weren't very helpful. So I was in my room and thinking, how do I get better at this? And I started writing exercises for myself, and took those home and started writing exercises for my students. And quickly I learned that you can't just put notes on the page. They actually have to do something. They have to help people get better. So it was a process of learning to write through teaching and through my own playing. And I wrote my exercises in pencil in little manuscript books, and I sent them home with students. And then a year later, when I was 19, I was robbed going home from school, held up at gunpoint, and they took a bunch of manuscript books that I had written for my students. And I vowed never to just write single pages again, anything that couldn't be copied. So I started writing with felt tip pen and making copies. And then we got our first computer, and I started writing in Finale, taught myself Finale and started writing those. And then my father, who was an editor and an artist, he pushed me to publish my first book. And pushed is an understatement. He was again relentless, just saying, when are you gonna publish that? Let's find a printer. And I'm very, very shy, but I did. I think I had to call them. That was really hard. And yeah, we went out and picked up my first print run of my first book that I got printed, which was Serial Shifting, Exercises in Rows and Patterns. And then a lot of books followed. Right now we sell to countries all over the world, and it's a really big part of my life. So one of my greatest passions is working with adults. I love teaching students of all ages, but one of my greatest passions is helping adults conquer their hands and use them to make music as efficiently and as well as possible. So many times teachers send students home and say, just practice. And I'm absolutely convinced that there are better ways to practice and better ways to learn, and we can find those.